The forest has always been a place of mystery. Some go there for peace, but others never return the same. Tonight, I'll share 5 true deep woods encounters, stories whispered around campfires that will make you think twice about camping alone. Picture this, it's late at night. The world around you has gone quiet. You're far from the noise of the city, far from the safety of streetlights and neighbors. The only light comes from the flickering glow of a fire you built yourself. And beyond that circle of warmth, the woods stretch endlessly into blackness. Every tree is a shadow, every branch a claw reaching into the night sky. The fire crackles softly, sparks lift into the air, glowing bright for a second before vanishing into the darkness above. Somewhere in the distance, an owl calls, its cry echoing across the valley. The wind stirs, carrying the smell of damp earth, pine needles, and the faint trace of smoke. For a moment, it feels peaceful, almost safe, almost... But then, you notice it. The rustle of leaves where there shouldn't be. The faint snap of a twig, as though a foot pressed down somewhere just beyond the firelight. You hold your breath and listen. Silence. Too much silence. Even the crickets have gone still, as if the forest itself is holding its breath, waiting. You glance into the woods. The trees stand tall and unmoving, but the shadows between them seem deeper than before, as if they're hiding something. The fire throws light, but it can't chase away the blackness that presses in from all sides. You tell yourself it's nothing, just your imagination. But the feeling stays. That creeping awareness that something is out there. Watching, listening, waiting for the right moment. This is why the woods unsettle so many. In the daylight they're beautiful, streams glittering, leaves glowing in the sun, trails winding endlessly through green. But at night, those same trails become paths you'd rather not take. Every sound becomes a warning, every silence feels heavier, and every step into that darkness feels like stepping into another world, one where you are not alone. Tonight, I'll tell you about 5 people who walked into that world. 5 true encounters from the deep woods. Some were camping, some were hiking, some were just passing through. But all of them came away changed. Their stories linger, passed down like warnings, whispered around campfires, told in hushed voices when the flames grow low. Stories of shadows that vanish when you look too long, voices that call your name when no one is there, and footsteps that follow you in the dark, until you realize they're far too close. So grab your blanket, turn off the lights, and let's step into the woods together. Story 1. The Vanishing Campfire Visitor. He thought he was alone until the sound of footsteps circled his tent. It was the middle of autumn when Daniel decided to head into the woods alone. He wasn't the type to be afraid of the dark, and he wasn't new to camping. In fact, he enjoyed it. The silence, the break from the world, the feeling of being swallowed up by nature. He'd done this before, but never this deep. This time, he wanted solitude, true solitude. He parked his car at the end of an old service road, strapped his pack to his shoulders, and hiked for hours until he was certain no one else was anywhere near him. No voices, no roads, no chance of another camper wandering past. Just him, his tent, and the endless forest. By late afternoon, he found a small clearing, barely big enough for a fire in his tent. He set everything up quickly, his breath fogging in the cool air. The sun dipped low, shadows stretched across the trees, and before long, the forest shifted into night. At first, it was peaceful. The fire crackled gently, the smell of burning wood mixed with pine and damp leaves. Somewhere distant, a stream babbled faintly. Daniel stretched out by the fire, warming his hands, listening to the night close in. He thought to himself, this was exactly what he came for. But then, as the hours passed, the silence grew heavier. It wasn't that the forest was loud before, it was that now it was too quiet. No owls, no crickets, no small animals scurrying in the just fire breathing and the occasional snap of wood. He brushed it off until he heard it, a footstep. At first he thought maybe it was his imagination. The forest plays tricks sometimes. A branch falls, the ground shifts, a log cracks. But then came another crunch. Soft but steady, deliberate, measured, human. Daniel froze, his eyes darting to the trees. The fire cast a circle of light, but beyond that, it was all darkness. The kind of darkness where your eyes invent shapes that aren't really there. He called out. His voice cracked the silence. "Hello? Anyone there?" Nothing. The footsteps stopped. He waited, every nerve on edge. The forest gave him nothing back. Only the fire popping quietly beside him. Minutes crawled by. Daniel forced a laugh, convincing himself it was just his imagination. He stirred the fire, threw another log in and sat back. But just as his heartbeat began to slow, it came again. Crunch, crunch, circling, not rushing, not charging, just moving around him. The sound of Daniel's throat went dry. He kept his eyes locked on the firelight, refusing to glance into the dark. His instincts screamed at him not to. He told himself it was probably a deer, maybe even a bear. But deep down he knew, deer don't walk in circles. Bears don't move that quietly. Then, the smell hit him. Smoke, but not from his fire. His fire was low, barely smoking at all. This was thicker, harsher, the acrid scent of something else burning, something close by. He turned slowly, searching the tree line, and that's when he saw it. A figure, sitting across the fire. Daniel's heart stopped. The man, if it was a man, sat motionless on the other side of the flames, his features hidden by shadows, only the faint outline of a body visible. Still, silent, watching. Daniel blinked, his mind racing. He hadn't heard anyone approach the fire, no footsteps crossing into the clearing, just the sound of them circling. And then, suddenly, there he was. The firelight flickered across the figure's shoulders, but the face remained lost in darkness. Daniel opened his mouth, his voice trembling. "Hello?" No response. Didn't speak, didn't even shift, just sat there, as if he had been there all along. Daniel's pulse pounded in his ears. He wanted to run. He wanted to grab his flashlight, his knife, something, but he couldn't move. The fire crackled between them, the only sound in the world. Seconds stretched into minutes. Daniel's body screamed at him to do something. Finally, he tore his eyes away, just for a moment, to reach for his flashlight. He looked back. No sound of footsteps leaving. No brush of branches, no crunch of leaves. Just gone. Daniel's breath came in shallow gasps. He swept the flashlight wildly across the trees. Nothing. He spun, searching every shadow. The woods looked empty, the clearing untouched, but the smell remained. Smoke, stronger now, filling his nostrils, stinging his throat. He stumbled back toward the fire, clutching the flashlight like a weapon, whispering to himself that he'd make it through the night. Just make it until morning. And somehow, he did. When the first rays of sunlight broke through the trees, Daniel packed up camp with shaking hands. He didn't bother eating. He didn't bother looking back. He left, and he never returned to that part of the forest again. But the story doesn't end there. Years later, while talking to a park ranger, Daniel recounted what had happened. The ranger listened quietly, then nodded and said, "You're not the first one." Apparently, others had seen the same thing. A figure by the fire. Always silent. Always gone the moment you looked away. A shadow that belonged to no one. And to this day, no one knows who or what it is. What would you have done in his place? Imagine sitting alone in the woods and realizing you're not alone anymore. Would you have confronted the figure, or packed up and left before sunrise? Tell me in the comments. I'll be reading every single one. And if this story gave you chills, subscribe not to miss out on any other story. Like, comment, and share to reach people like you interested in stories like this. Stay close, because the next encounter is even darker. And it proves that sometimes the forest itself feels alive. Story 2. The Whistling in the Pines. Whistling isn't unusual in the woods, unless it follows you everywhere you go. The night was cool, with the kind of sharp chill that seeps through your clothes when the fire burns low. A group of 4 friends had set up camp in the heart of a dense pine forest, tall, thin trunks rising endlessly into the night sky, their needles swaying with each gust of wind like 1,000 whispering voices. They weren't beginners. They'd camped before. They laughed, cooked over the fire, and shared stories well past midnight. But as the fire dimmed and the forest grew louder, one of them, Ethan, thought he heard something odd. A faint whistle, soft, distant, almost blending in with the wind. At first they brushed it off. Maybe another camper out there, maybe nothing at all. But as the night wore on, that whistle didn't fade. It grew clearer. It started on the left side of camp, like someone standing deep in the trees. 2 notes, rising, falling. They froze, listening. Then it moved, from the left to the right, from the right to behind them. Always shifting, never steady. The sound became too human to dismiss, but too unnatural to explain. Worse, after an hour, the whistling began to change. It started to mimic. One of the friends, Sarah, had laughed earlier that night in a high, distinct pitch. Suddenly, the whistling copied that exact pattern, stretching it into an eerie melody. Another friend, Marcus, had been humming while chopping firewood. Now the whistle matched his tune, though slower, distorted, almost mocking. Every time they spoke, laughed, or made a sound, the whistling answered back. Finally, Ethan snapped, "I'm going to find whoever's doing this." Despite protests, he grabbed his flashlight and walked toward the sound. The beam cut through the thick rows of pines, but the whistle always stayed just out of reach, leading him deeper, step by step. Minutes passed, then an hour. The whistling didn't stop. It only grew fainter, swallowed by the forest. The others waited. They shouted his name. They whistled back, but there was no response. And the whistling? It returned, right outside their circle of light, slow, taunting, almost as if the forest itself was pleased. At dawn, the 3 remaining friends rushed to the nearest ranger station. A full search began. Dogs, officers, volunteers. For days they combed the pine forest. Locals later told them a story about a voice in the woods that lures wanderers away, never to be seen again. They called it the forest's call. And that whistle? To this day, if you walk too deep into those pines, some say you can still hear it. If you were camping with friends and heard whistling in the dark, would you chase it down to prove it was nothing, or stay put and wait until morning? Drop your answer in the comments. I'm curious to know how brave you'd really be. And stay close, because the next story takes us even deeper into the woods, where the sounds don't just follow campers, they surround them. Story 3. The Cabin with No Windows. They thought they found shelter, but the cabin was never meant for the living. It was supposed to be a quick, weekend hike, just 2 friends, Aaron and Melissa, cutting through the thick stretch of woodland before the storm rolled in. The sky had been gray since morning, but by late afternoon the trees seemed to swallow what little light was left. The forest. The rain came suddenly, cold, heavy drops pounding the leaves overhead. The wind hissed through the trees, bending the branches, and thunder shook the ground beneath their boots. They needed shelter. They needed it fast. That's when Aaron spotted it, a cabin. It was just sitting there, in the woods, tucked between towering pines. Strange, yes, but at that moment, it felt like salvation. As they rushed toward it, something about the place felt off. The cabin had no windows. Not a single one, just a crooked door hanging slightly open, as if it had been waiting for someone to step inside. The moment they crossed the threshold, the storm seemed muffled. as though the forest itself had gone silent. Their footsteps echoed unnaturally against the wooden floor. Melissa pulled out her flashlight, sweeping the beam across the room. The cabin was bare. No chairs, no bed, no tools. Just wooden walls covered in faint carvings. At first they thought the marks were random scratches, but then Melissa leaned closer and gasped. Words, dozens of them carved into the wood. Don't stay after dark. They come when the rain stops. Run before the silence. Aaron tried to laugh it off, saying it must have been kids messing around. But Melissa wasn't convinced. The deeper they looked, the more carvings they found. Some were so frantic, the wood had splintered. And then, the door slammed shut. The wind had died outside. The storm was gone. Yet inside, the cabin grew colder. From the walls came a sound, first faint, like the soft drag of claws on wood. Then louder, scratch, 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 moving from one wall to the next, circling them. Melissa clutched Aaron's arm, whispering, "There's something out there." The floor creaked as if weight pressed against it, though nothing was there. The scratches grew frantic, racing along the walls, pounding, as though something was trying to break through. Aaron grabbed his flashlight, shining it across the room, but the carvings seemed deeper now, sharper, as if they had been freshly made. The words seemed to glow in the pale beam. "Don't stay after dark." Then came the worst sound of all. Slow, heavy breathing. Not theirs, not human, right outside the door. They didn't wait to see what it was. They shoved the door open and ran, stumbling blindly through the trees until dawn. Hours later, exhausted and soaked, they stumbled upon a ranger station. When they described the cabin, the ranger frowned. He told them there were no cabins in that part of the woods. Not anymore. The last one had burned down decades ago. Still shaking, Aaron and Melissa returned weeks later with another group to prove what they saw. They retraced their steps, but where the cabin once stood, there was nothing, only trees, and the ground oddly smooth, as if something heavy had once stood there, and then simply vanished. Would you trust a random shelter in the woods, or would you rather take your chances in the storm? If this story made you look twice at every cabin in the forest, you're not alone. Share your thoughts in the comments. Would you have stepped inside or kept walking? Don't forget to hit that like button if you're enjoying these chilling tales, and subscribe for more terrifying stories to keep you up at night. Now, let's move on to the next encounter in the woods. Story 4. The Man in the Red Jacket. You don't forget a face that appears where no one should be. A family thought they were on a safe camping trip until the man in the red jacket showed up. It was a quiet family getaway. 2 parents and their 2 children, ages 7 and 10. They had picked a secluded campground near the edge of a national forest, far from busy trails. The sun was setting, painting the tree line in orange and gold, and the family was roasting marshmallows, laughing, and sharing stories. The woods were calm, almost too calm. No distant campers, no faint chatter, just silence broken by the crackle of fire. That's when the children noticed him first. At the very edge of the tree line, half hidden between 2 pines, stood a man. He wore a red jacket, not moving, not waving, just watching. The kids thought maybe it was another camper, but when they pointed, their parents saw nothing. The man was gone. The woods were dense, but the trail was clear. The next afternoon, the father decided to take the kids on a short hike while the mother prepped dinner at camp. The woods were dense, but the trail was clear. As they walked, the younger child froze. There, through the trees, the man in the red jacket again, silent, standing perfectly still. The father called out, "Hello? Are you lost? Do you need help?" No response. The figure didn't move. He brushed it off, maybe just a local hiker, maybe a trick of the light, but unease settled in. That night, as the family sat by the fire, one of the kids whispered, "Daddy, he's back." This time, everyone saw him. A few dozen yards away at the edge of the firelight stood the man in the red jacket. The flames flickered, but he didn't step closer. He didn't retreat either, just watched. The parents tried to act calm, ushering the kids into the tent. They reassured them, saying it was nothing, just another camper. But deep down, they didn't believe it. Hours later, sometime after midnight, the father woke to the sound of crunching leaves. He sat up quietly. The woods were silent again, except for slow, deliberate footsteps circling the tent. Heart racing, he peeked through the small mesh window, and there he was. The man in the red jacket stood only feet away from the tent, his face obscured by the darkness. He wasn't walking anymore. He was standing completely still, as if he had been waiting for the father to look. The father's instincts screamed, "Do not move, do not speak." He held his breath, gripping a flashlight in one hand and a pocket knife in the other. The figure leaned slightly closer, as though trying to peer inside the tent. Then, just as suddenly as he appeared, he stepped backward into the woods. Gone. At dawn, the family didn't even bother with breakfast. They packed up their gear as quickly as possible and left the campground. Later, when the father reported the strange encounter to a park ranger, the ranger grew silent. Finally, he said, "There was a hiker who went missing around these parts last year. He was last seen wearing a red jacket. We never found him." The father asked, "Are you saying he's still out here?" The ranger only shook his head. "I don't think he's out here anymore. What would you do if you saw someone watching your tent all night? Would you confront them or pack up and leave before the sun came up?" If this story gave you chills, make sure you hit that like button, drop a comment sharing what you do in that situation, and don't forget to subscribe for more terrifying camping stories. And hey, if you know someone brave enough to hear this, share this video with them. They might not sleep so easily next time they go camping. Story 5. The Silent Forest. The forest is alive with sounds, unless something has scared them all away. He had been hunting these woods for years. The kind of man who knew every sound, every trail, every broken twig beneath his boots. Out here, the forest was never truly quiet. There were the rustles of rabbits darting through underbrush, the low croak of frogs, the constant rhythm of wind pushing against the canopy. But that day, the silence came, and it came all at once. At first he didn't notice. He was focused, tracking a buck through the pines, bow drawn tight. But then he realized something was wrong. The birds weren't singing, the branches weren't swaying, even his own breathing felt too loud. It was like the world itself was holding its breath. He stopped walking. Every hair on his body stood up. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, oppressive, almost intentional. Hunters know this feeling. When nature goes quiet, it usually means a predator is close. A wolf, a bear, something that scares the smaller creatures into hiding. But this silence, it felt bigger. The hunter scanned the trees. Nothing moved. His chest tightened. He whispered to himself just to break the stillness, "Keep it together." His voice sounded wrong in the air, too sharp, too out of place. Then he saw it, a shadow. Long, thin, and impossibly tall, moving between the trees. It wasn't rushing, it wasn't hunting, it was watching. The hunter blinked. Nothing there, just trees. But as he stepped forward, he saw it again, slipping behind a trunk. Every time he thought he caught a glimpse, it would vanish, like it knew exactly how to hide just outside of full sight. His pulse quickened. He gripped his bow tighter, but deep down he knew this wasn't something an arrow could stop. Then it stepped closer. The hunter didn't hear footsteps. He didn't hear branches breaking. It was just there, closer than before, between the trees, tall enough that its head brushed the lower branches. He froze. Couldn't move, couldn't breathe. And then came the worst part. The shadow leaned, not forward, not backward, but sideways, as if its neck or its whole frame bent unnaturally to peek at him from behind the trees. It didn't make sense. Nothing human moves like that. The hunter's throat tightened. He turned, ready to run, when the silence deepened. The air itself felt thick, suffocating, almost humming. His ears rang like the pressure before a storm, and then the shadow disappeared. Not by running, not by moving, it was just gone. That was enough. The hunter bolted. His boots pounded against the soil, but even his running sounded muffled, like the silence swallowed every sound before it could echo. He didn't stop until he reached his truck, and even then, he sat behind the wheel, drenched in sweat, scanning the tree line. When he finally told his story, he said one thing that stuck with me: I know every animal in these woods. That thing wasn't one of them, and it sure as hell wasn't human. So I'll ask you, if you were deep in the wilderness, and suddenly the forest went silent, no birds, no bugs, no wind, would you keep walking through it, or would you run the second the quiet set in? If you've made it this far, you're one of the brave ones. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I really want to hear what you would have done. And hey, if you enjoyed this story, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and share it with a friend who loves a good scare. It helps the channel more than you know, and it keeps me telling stories like this for you. And there you have it. 5 chilling deep woods encounters. Each one different, yet all with the same reminder that when we step into the forest, we're not just surrounded by trees and animals. We're stepping into something far older, something that doesn't always welcome us. Think about it. The couple who heard the whispers in the woods, the hikers who stumbled upon a cabin that wasn't supposed to exist, the man in the red jacket watching from the tree line. These aren't just stories. To the people who lived through them, they were very real. And the scariest part? These encounters never come with answers. You leave the woods, but the questions follow you home. So let me ask you, which of these stories is going to keep you awake tonight? Was it the cabin that disappeared? The silent forest? Or maybe the man standing just outside the tent? I'd love to know. Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you've ever had your own terrifying camping experience, share it. I read every single one. If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to hit that like button. It helps more people find these videos. And subscribe, because I've got even more true horror stories lined up. Ones that will make you think twice before your next camping trip. Share this with a friend you know would never survive a night out here. And let's see if they prove you wrong. But before you go, remember this: the forest is never really empty. If the wind dies, if the insects go silent, if even the birds stop singing, don't relax, because silence in the woods usually means only one thing: something is listening.